But with tracking, so I'm not going to go through what Elevar does. Many of you are customers, which I'm very thankful for and fortunate, but I just thought it would set the stage, or what are the knowns and the unknowns that we have today in our industry and the so whats. So let's start with some of the knowns. We all know we have privacy headwinds. So I had Felipe, Vishal, then two experts on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were going through the GDPR changes. And yes, we have CCPA and other state regulations coming out in the U.S., but we're talking really about how serious it's getting in Europe and how that's moving over into the U.S. Let's just start with Europe. There are brands, I think this might have been Miko from Woolman, we were talking about a few weeks ago with John in another episode of the podcast. I'm not pitched. If you don't listen to the conversion tracking podcast for the two people, you can share it to the 3 or 4. But they're going like, they have big brands that are just cut off all tracking. They literally removed their Facebook pixel, got rid of Google tag, everything. And the natural question is, well, what's performance look like? And the answer, not good. So it's a very serious issue that, again, brands that are based out of Europe or have a big presence in Europe, it is a very serious, especially if you are a larger brand where you have a legal team, you are essentially being forced to remove it because the cost of a lawsuit in many cases or some cases is more expensive than, growing by 30, 40%, and you just have to accept that 10 to 15% growth. So that's headwinds we're facing. And then here in the States, for many of you that, again, Viore started out of San Diego and California, so many brands that we have that have a big focus in California, they're now having to make drastic measures of someone moving to that opt-in, so only collecting data when someone opts in. And you can see here, this is not to get political, but you have all these different states. When this just makes our industry so much more complicated, every state has a different framework, a different name, different nuances, different rules, different implementations, different guidelines, and that complexity, unfortunately, is going to be handed down to us as business owners. And this isn't a scare tactic at all, but it's just something to be cognizant of, because we are starting to see even some of our customers that do have a large presence in California where they are starting to get the lawsuits. So similar to the accessibility lawsuits that I'm sure many, who's got an accessibility law? Yeah. So, and keep your hands up if you've gotten more than one. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty common. So basically it's, you get a lawsuit like, hey, your site is not accessible, or is it accessible to different types of folks, pay us $10,000 and we'll drop the suit. I mean, it's just a money grab. So we're starting to see that move into a world of privacy. And this is where consent compliance and everything that goes into just being very thoughtful about your tracking is critical. So those are headwinds that we're facing. This one's pretty quick. We all know about this. Ad blockers, backlinko.io. He has a great article, Brian Dean, and it's the most thorough article. It's probably #1 if you search it. So if you want more stats, it ranges from 33%, so about a third of Americans are using some sort of ad blocker at any given time. And then you have some countries where it's 50 to 60%, which is pretty wild. This is where we'll get into the weeds in the world of Elevar. So we have cookie expirations. Who here feels like you really understand when someone says, hey, our cookies are expiring, what that means? Okay, we got a few. Okay. Who knows the difference between first and third-party cookies? Okay. Who here has seen the headlines that says, cookies are dead, we are all in big trouble? All right, so that's the clickbait headlines. So I won't get into the first versus third-party cookie comparison, but in short, what we're seeing with browsers like Safari, and most of us, your traffic is 50+% on Safari or iOS, which will be mobile Safari, is the browsers are essentially, they're becoming the judge and the jury of, hey, if we see someone coming in from a Facebook ad, instead of letting Facebook set an expiration of their cookie to 90 days, we are making the decision that we are going to reset that to 24 hours. And that is every WebKit rollout that changes, the rules change. So that isn't necessarily like a privacy regulation that's coming out, that is coming from these different walled gardens that are deciding how they want to allow tracking or be on the forefront of privacy. So cookie expirations, if there's one takeaway here, it's just to understand that if you more than 50% of your traffic is coming into your site from paid links from Facebook or Google or anywhere else, if it's happening on a Safari browser or Firefox or Brave or any of these other newer browsers that are very privacy focused, just assume that your cookie, their first party cookies that help connect activity on your site to views or clicks of an ad, they're expiring in 24 hours. So when that user comes back in 25 hours, it's essentially a new user. Not that Facebook or others aren't trying to do their own matching and they have different ways to match, but just assume those cookies are expiring, which is why, as I'll get into shortly, the growth of first-party data and server-side tracking is becoming, it's table stakes now. You have to be doing it to stay ahead of these changes. Then we have the iOS 16 and 17 rollouts, which honestly, there were some of those similar clickbait headlines that came out last year, but we were getting into Q4 and everyone, I felt like, was kind of like, we'll worry about that in 2024. Right now, we're just going to focus on Q4. But this is there's a set of click IDs. So think your Facebook click ID or G click ID. If someone's coming in through Apple Mail or Apple SMS or private tracking, those click IDs will be removed. Now, that doesn't mean your Facebook advertising will no longer work and you won't report back. It just means Facebook will have to rely on getting emails or other user identifiers to try to match, again, clicks and views of an ad to activity on a website. And then we have our known trackers. So this is a screenshot from your iPhone. And so these are just a few examples of other things that aren't really talked about yet, much yet, except if you are in the world of Elevar and listen to our podcast. But there are other things that are happening that long-term are going to impact the ability to just copy and paste a script in the Google Tag Manager or in your theme.liquid and just assume tracking is going to work. So you have IP obfuscation, which is that hide IP address from known trackers. And the tracker, again, is going to be Facebook, Google, etc. And then you have on the right side is the advanced tracking and fingerprinting protection. So right now, again, the last release, when Apple rolled out this update, they said, hey, we're only going to block known trackers and everything that comes along with known trackers like cookies, etc., if you're in private browsing mode. But there's an option, if you click into that, you can change that to all browsing. Now, when this came out, we wanted to test. Excuse me, I've done a lot of talking last 2 days, so I'm a little hoarse. And thank you, Rochelle, for putting water up here. So we wanted to just quantify, okay, what percentage of sites are being browsed in private browsing mode. And John, I don't know if John is here or at the Elevar expert table, but so we went through, implemented it on a few sites just to measure, and it was about 10 to 15%. And that's a large percentage. So if you rewind back to the value prop of Elevar 3 to 4 years ago was, hey, you're probably only collecting 90% of your conversions or sending 90% to Facebook or Google, move to server-side tracking so we can get you 100%. So now if we just assume this is enabled, you're losing 10 to 15% of known trackers, you're back to that 90%. So this could be a change in the future. If I could predict the future, I might not be on the stage here, but this could be one that's default. Apple might decide that, hey, we're blocking all known trackers by default in iOS 18, 19. Hopefully they're not watching this. Hopefully they are watching this. Don't do that, Apple. We have a lot of small business owners that you're going to put out of business if you do that. One more quick thing here. If you are anyone technical in the room, or if you want to grab, again, John or others on the Elevar team, you can simulate this. So you can connect your iPhone to if you have a MacBook, connect it to Safari, and then go into dev mode, and you can browse your phone. You can change your settings, you can change versions, and you can browse for yourself and see what trackers are blocked in your site. So again, if you have any questions, just start with John, and he can give you some tips. But it's a cool way when a new release comes out, and you just want to see for yourself or have your team go and do this research, and just do that, and then you can simulate it and report back to your team on what's working, what's firing or not firing. Other headwinds that we have, walled gardens. As I mentioned, iOS, we have shops and marketplaces, etc. And I've spent a lot of time talking to many of you here the last couple of days of just understanding what's your thought on the future of shops, whether it's Meta shops, TikTok shops, Shop app, etc. And then how are you, we're not getting customer data, all the customer data. So Amazon, what's the process for going through and trying to blend that data, put that to use in other channels? So these are headwinds. It's just another task, another process that you all have to go through to try to ensure that your marketing remains efficient. So what does this all mean? In short, it just means it's getting harder to understand who is on your site, how to market to them, and where to market to them. It's also adding friction to your engineering and development resources, unless you're sitting next to Gene and he'll just automate everything with a few buttons. But it is adding that extra pressure of just staying on top of these changes. It's not all headwinds though. There are some tailwinds as well. So some tailwinds that we are seeing, we have more platforms that are releasing their own CAPI endpoints, so conversion APIs. When Shopify released their Pixel API, I think about 2 years ago, we started evangelizing with all of our marketing tech partners. So who here has more than 5 tags, pixels, trackers on your website? So raise your hand if you have more than 5. All right, keep your hands up if you have more than 10. 15, 20. Emily, don't put your hand down. Just kidding. So many, we all have at least 5, minimum of 10. So a tracker could be your Facebook and Google's, and it's your TikToks, and it's like, hey, we might use Snapchat someday, so we're gonna keep that going. Oh, Reddit, I heard is really good, so we're gonna put our Reddit pixel on there just in case we wanna build that audience and market to them. And then it might be, well, Taboola, we might do native advertising, or we're gonna get into Roku, or we're gonna do connected TV, or Tatari, whatever it might be. So you have all these trackers on site. 2 to 3 years ago, most did not have a server-side API where we could send data to. So that was a question that we were getting from many of our customers. Hey, can we just send all of our tracking server-side to all of our channels? The answer was no. And it's not because Elevar or someone similar to Elevar can't do that. It's simply because those channels did not have an API set up to accept that data. So I like to bucket into 3. When it comes to sending data to a channel, you have the Metas of the world that want your client-side tracking and server-side tracking. Then you have bucket number 2, where they just want client-side or server-side. So affiliates fit here. So think your share sales, Pepper Jams of the world, where if you can send them on 100% of conversions and extend their click IDs, which currently are not being blocked from the known tracker list yet, they're great. They want it. Affiliates want, Pepper Jam, they want all of their orders. So it's a client side or a server side. So that's that second bucket. And then you have the third bucket, which is still the biggest bucket. The third bucket is they can only do client side tracking. They can't do server side tracking. So that is the bucket that our team has been working very hard on evangelizing with many of these platforms and helping them build it. And let's give John, Katie, Jerica's not here, but our engineering team, just give them a big round of applause, please, because it is not an easy thing to do to chase down these platforms and try to get them to work with us. So I can't see who's in here, but so that's where with Elevar, we're continuing to beta test and roll out more. And again, we're generally working with their engineering teams. So that's bucket number 3. I'll end on that. I won't go any further on CAPI. So some other tailwinds, we are seeing more uniform data. So this is sending the same user and event data to each platform and enriched from multiple data sources. So think CDP style, or pulling in different purchase events, so a webhook and a client-side data layer event, blending that all together, making super events, and then sending that to your marketing channels. So I like to look at it, think about a spider web. So many of you years ago, you might have had a Google sheet where in column A you had Facebook and Google Ads and Snapchat. You had all of your platforms, and then column A, then column B, C, D, E, F was page views, product views, add to carts, initiate checkouts, purchases. And someone would plug in those numbers and be like, well, why the hell does Facebook have 90, but Google only has 70? So that's where the movement to more server-side tracking, honestly, more players like Elevar coming in the space, it's great for everyone here because it creates competition. It forces innovation to keep pushing. So that's where this uniform data is going to help just make things easier. And this is possible with advancements in first-party collection and server-side tracking. So first-party data collection, hopefully everyone has heard that term before. And server-side tracking is simply, it's either you're taking data from your browser, so client-side data collection and processing it server-side, which is the most common, or you have server-side data collection, so accepting data directly from the server, so think webhooks, and then processing that. So you're collecting it server-side and processing it server-side. By doing that, that's what really allows you to have that 100% conversion match across all events. So other tailwinds that we're seeing, so data modeling. Who here has heard or read that GA4 is doing conversion modeling? Okay, we got a few hands. Does that, I assume everyone else, that means that you have not heard of it. So let me just do a quick overview on what that means. So GA4, the 4-letter word these days, has fully integrated consent mode. But Google is very incentivized, as we all know, to ensure that Google AdWords continues to work and function for you and bring you new customers or more returning customers. So when they get to the point where, let's say you have consent mode enabled, so you are no longer sending all of your user identifiable data with Google's cookies, with the events to Google, so they understand what's happening. So we're now you're blocking 30 to 40%. So where conversion modeling is coming in is Google is taking what they know about that other 60%, so the 60% that you are sending them with everything that you're able to, including user identifiers. And essentially what they're trying to do is take that and then take your pixel-less hits that you're sending from consented data that you're sending to GA4, which you are able to do, and essentially just predicting like, hey, even though we don't have all of user information for this subset of data, we know what's going on with this other 60%, and we can see some things that you're sending. So we're going to try to backfill some of this conversion data to make your conversions whole that you are importing to Google Ads. Now that makes those of you or those of us that are like, why the hell is Google Ads saying 102 conversions and Shopify says 101? Why don't they match 100%? That world is gone of just everything matching up 100%. And we have to thank modeling for us, because if we didn't have that in place, then you would just be missing 30 to 40, or if not more, % of conversions in Google Ads, which will impact your ability to scale, profit, etc. Some other tailwinds. So this is somewhat related to that first-party data collection. So just more ways to identify new and returning users. If you're an Elevar customer, you've likely seen our session enrichment. But again, this is another advancement in our world. Not that it's new, that there's more players in the space, which makes it better for all of you and all of us, because we're all trying to find ways to make your marketing perform better. Other tailwinds, so custom conversions. If we rewind, and I am definitely not the person that should be up here talking about this. I should have probably these three guys up here talking about this, but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, targeting was through audiences was such a powerful and easy way to scale. Now we can't, because everything I've talked about with the headwinds. So now with some of the tailwinds we're seeing are custom conversions. So it could be as simple as, okay, you want new and returning purchase events in Meta, but you can get even more complex. So whether it's subscription events, or we have some customers that are going down by category level or product level. And so it's flipping, instead of using audience targeting to say, hey, go find more people that are going to buy this particular category. Now it's using, okay, take these conversion events, and we're going to use that to apply, because now Meta is going very broad with Advantage Plus, which is performing very well for most. But using those custom conversions to, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, this isn't documented anywhere, but to try to accomplish the same thing as very detailed or precise audience targeting. But this leads into, which I'll get into here in a couple of minutes, is using, I think these platforms are using more about, like, what are you doing? When you're on your phone, what are you clicking on? What outbound links are you clicking on? What are you doing? Because that is your actions tell us more about who you are than what you are telling us who you are. So your saved links that you might see in Instagram, or your outbound links. Tailwinds, second and third party data. So teasing Philip from Buxton at the end here, we'll be doing that propensity score. He'll talk a little bit more about the data sets, the 723 data sets, and just it's the perfect match between the Elevar and first party data and Buxton's expertise working with the Warby Parkers and Nordstroms of the world to help find customers outside in the real world and bringing that together with the first-party data. But that is the tailwind that we are seeing. And actually, Jacob, I'm not sure if Jacob is in here, but when he was demoing yesterday, so he's doing that already. They're pulling in mosaics. They're pulling mosaics from Experian, blending that with their Google Analytics data, and using that to create personas to guide their customers on, hey, here are your personas. Here are the categories that are performing better or worse. He had that pretty cool stat on a number of different page views to get to a certain event. So again, if that was a fairly deep session for the data nerds here, but go talk to him and just learn more about how they're doing that, because those are tailwinds. So if you start leveraging some of this data, it will give you a competitive advantage versus just relying on what I call stick figure first-party data. That's just, I did these things on a website and here's my email, but that's all I am. Enriching it with more about making me 3D. I'm a top golfer. I'm whatever. I live in Charleston. It can be very powerful. So those are tailwinds. Other tailwinds. So we have pixelless attribution. So Prescient, Rockerbox, others. So 2 sponsors here that helped make the summit available. Those are other tailwinds that I view as, okay, if all tracking went away, what's the next step? So I think these are advancements in our world in the tech side that are helping all of us just improve or give us more potential to improve. Tailwinds, we have shops that work. I've heard some where they're relying just on meta shops, which for some, like, why would you do that? Nobody shops there. And then like, well, 25% of our new customers are coming from meta shops, or 50% or whatever it might be. It's just, I think these shops are giving us new opportunities, or giving you all new opportunities to just focus on different channels. It's a walled garden. Meta has the entire activity of what's going on in the add to cart events. So they're able to piece that puzzle together to just make that ad efficiency a little bit better than just driving everyone to the site. So those are all the knowns, the headwinds and tailwinds. Now let's get to the unknowns. So some of the unknowns, so these are some of the questions and the future of the theme for the conference. So the AI identification. So when does this become real and precise? When will, and this is not an if, this is a when, and hopefully you'll see that from Elevar soon, Elevar and Buxton soon, but when will websites predict users based on their activity on site? So we all saw in Gene's presentation yesterday that probably less than 6 months, whether it's Claude or OpenAI or whatever model, it's going to be smarter than us, and it's going to continue to compound. And they're 24/7, 365, and they can have their swarms working together. And that's a beehive. And I don't know, who was the beekeeper? Who was the beekeeper I was talking to yesterday? That was an interesting conversation. But it's going to be this world will make things possible that we won't be able to humanly think we can do. When will websites prompt users with open-ended questions to use to match? I'll try to send it after, but there's a really niche podcast. I won't remember the name, but it was one of the head of products at Shopify who focuses on their AI. And even he was talking about the future of storefront of, yes, like search is the easy portal into making things more AI compatible and just smart search. But what I took from that and the vision that I see is at some point, your website could just become a prompt like, hey, what are you looking for? Or what are you looking for? And then using that to like, oh, that's probably Brandon from Javi because whatever. Like those pieces will start to be put together. So it was interesting to listen to some of the innovation at Shopify where their head is thinking 2 to 3 years down the road. Remind me, Kaylee or Rochelle, to grab that podcast so we can send it out to everybody after. And there's like a 15-minute clip. Another unknown, cohort-based marketing. So Google, they have their Flock and other things that they tested, and essentially they're just trying to bucket users based on shared characteristics versus individually tracking. Who knows how this is going to go, but that's something that's an unknown of when and if that'll happen. When will we tap into rich device data? So eye tracking, I think Paul and Josh, they're somewhere, I think even you guys have this in your deck later, right? Getting into some of the advancements of, hey, well, what if we can just use some of the device interactions to tell us who the user is? Is that possible if we prompt the user to accept? Audio fingerprinting. So as we move more to voice prompts, who here uses notes, like voice notes to communicate? internally with your team? Who uses the Slack audio feature? I don't know, half the room maybe. That is we are training ourselves to go from written by, instead of just having to write a long blog post or SEO or email, just have AI do it for us. And then we want to save more time using audio. So when can that start? And we already know that you can use 11 Labs and others to create a podcast that sounds just like me. So when will this come into the world of attribution and tracking? Smart home data hubs. This is another one. This is probably the biggest unknown, but we are going to be interacting more. We already interact with a lot of our smart home devices. So when can that start to become, or if that could become, the customer data collection hub where that's the source, and then we start spreading it out, sharing that with other platforms. Another unknown, when will walled gardens, what data will we get about our customers as competition heats up? So as the competition heats up, are they going to become more closed where they're going to share less data with you? What will that mean? Will you pull out because it's not worth it for you because you don't get to own the customer? And then the last one here, privacy. What happens if all those laws that I mentioned at the beginning of the tailwinds with the 12 or so state laws, like the 12 quote unquote CCPAs, if that's now 50 and everything moves to opt-in only, what happens there? That's not going to happen this year, it won't happen next year, but those are things that we think about as a business to try to stay ahead. So if you're wondering, okay, Brad, what are we going to do about all this stuff? Let's do the audio tracking. We'll hook it up maybe tomorrow. But these are things that we are thinking about. I try to live a year to 2, 3 years in the future, not necessarily today, because I know that Meta, Apple, the big, Googles of the world, they work in decades. They don't work in months or years. They're thinking in decades. So these are some of the things that we're thinking about as a business. And I can't believe I did this, but it's counting down from 5, Rochelle, and I'm on time. All right.